Boardroom Bound, Episode 28, How to Market Yourself Like No One Else Can, with Mike Kim.
Marketing isn't about closing a sale. It's about opening a relationship. And if you are an expert in any kind of field, you're paid for what you think. You're paid to use your brain. You're paid for your thoughts, and you never share your thoughts, you have no marketing.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give new and aspiring directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu, and we've got a lot of resources to link to today. And that's because in today's show, we're talking with my friend Mike Kim. Mike is considered one of the personal branding experts. His podcast called Brand You is the #1 rated podcast in iTunes on the topic of personal branding, and it's consistently at the top. And Mike is a master at distilling complex subject into simple, easy, digestible, teachable ways. So Mike will talk about personal branding at large, but also some very actionable ways that we can all take it forward. Another thing I'm really excited to tell you about today is Boardroom Bound has been included in the People's Choice Podcast Awards. So over at podcastawards.com, they're voting during the entire month of July, and the top 10 vote getters go to the final round. And if you didn't tune in last week on the 4th of July, maybe you were traveling and didn't listen to your normal podcast, you might not have heard the details about it. It's over at podcastawards.com. It takes about 30 seconds to vote. And we're really excited to be associated with previous winners. So Freakonomics, NPR's Planet Money, that sort of caliber, sort of elite level of podcasts, which for us, it's really fun just to be getting our name out there from when we started as a small little podcast in February to where we are now, getting international recognition. So we're thrilled for our audience members who have already participated, and we're grateful for your time. And for the others, we would ask you just take 30 seconds to help share that. That nomination will go a great distance for us in terms of getting other people to be aware of the podcast so we can help them to help themselves in terms of landing that board seat and bringing their best self to the boardroom. So this is the 14th annual People's Choice Podcast Awards. There are some incredible shows that have been nominated. We're thrilled to be a part of that. We're eager to get as many votes as we can so that we can get to the final round, and we'll continue to promote that. So that happens during the entire month of July. It would take you about 30 seconds at podcastawards.com. Mike Kim, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Alexander, it is great to be here with you, and for those of you tuning in, great to be with you guys, and hope to add some value to you today.
So, Mike, I'm thrilled to be sharing you and your knowledge with our listeners because for anyone who's a new or aspiring director, we might not think about it like this, but the personal branding is essential. You are the expert on it. You're certainly my go-to guy in it, #1 rated podcast for that on iTunes. So we can start to unpack that for our listeners today. But just in terms of a little context, that's a big term. It sounds almost sort of scary, building a brand for ourselves. How do we begin to even think about that?
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. I came from, I came from the regular world too. I wasn't always like a blogger or a podcaster or anything like that. So here's how I just define brand. It's a brand is just, your brand is just what people say about you when you're not in the room. And if we were to just use that as kind of a guiding line for everything that we think about, it's your reputation. It's, we all have brands. We all have thoughts towards some people. It's what we say about certain coworkers or colleagues or our bosses or people that we meet. It's what we say about our family members, and that's a personal brand, right? Like, he's lazy, or he's so hardworking, or, he's ambitious, or he's very, complacent in life. These are all, that is a brand in a sense, where the word brand comes from. Of course, a cattle brand, right? The farmers of old used to take, this steel and literally burn it into the hide of their animals, right? And that was theirs, right? It labeled them. So a brand in a lot of ways is a label. Is it always fair? No. Is it always accurate? No. And that's why I'm such an advocate for shaping that, because you do have agency, you do have the ability to shape that, and that's what I help people do, whether they're building a business around themselves or they're trying to advance their career at work, whatever it is, we have a reputation. And if you have a good reputation, you have a solid brand, you'll go much further in life.
And in some ways, it's easy to understand about yourself. You went from a chief marketing officer, which has a lot of the same skill sets and experience you use today, to move into this space where you're sort of the guru marketing strategist and business coach for other people doing it. And I think you touched on a good point. It's not just for a business, it's also for an individual, sort of that and or, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that I had the marketing skills. I came from a marketing background, but when I went into consulting, I had to start wearing all these hats that I wasn't used to wearing. When you step out and become an entrepreneur, I had to become the innovator. I had to become the sales guy. I had to become the finance person. I had to become the budget person. I had to become all these things that were outside the scope of my actual skill in marketing. And here's the rub. If I don't do those other things well, that contributes to my brand. Right, or a negative connotation with my brand. If I don't pay people on time, if I don't, if I'm sloppy with the way that I talk to people on the phone during a sales call, it doesn't matter how skilled I am. They're going to start to think Mike's not very professional, and so I had to learn how to brand myself in all those other areas. Right, make sure that they were reflecting the expertise that I wanted my clients to feel that I could bring to them. So it's everything. It's everything.
And that makes sense, and it's easy to put that in the context of someone who's thinking, great, I want to position myself. Let's say they're in the C-suite now or about to be in the C-suite, and they're thinking 5 years or so down the road, and I want to be a paid board director. And, one of your podcast episodes, I love the podcast, comes to mind for me. I think it was like number 169, the 3 people standing between where you are and where you want to be. And to me, this really encapsulated the idea of you're beginning to position yourself for the next stage or the end game, whatever you want to think about it. Can we break that down for our audience?
Yeah, so in that one, I'm an alliteration guy because I just think it makes it easy for me to remember to teach, and then for other people to remember. But there are basically 3 versions of you in play when we talk about branding and taking control of that narrative. There's the public you, and this is how people perceive you, right? This is what you're known for. There's the present you, right? And that's who you are now, right? Who you are now. And who you are now is different from the way that sometimes you're perceived in public. And then the third is the pending you, who you're going to become, right? Who you're going to become. And so, just to tell you a story, like there was a gentleman in one of my coaching groups, and he said to me, Mike, I really want to get into the fitness space. I had such a transformation in my body and then in my life after I got passionate about health and fitness that I want to become, this fitness person. And I was like, what do you do for a living? And he said, I'm a math teacher.
That's a
right?
change.
And he said, right. And he's like, how do I navigate this? I'm like, okay. So the present you're a math teacher who wants to become, a fitness coach in some way, right? But the public perception of you is that you're a math teacher, right? And the pending you is to become that fitness trainer. So here's what I told him. I said, okay, under no circumstances are you ever allowed to talk about math or your teaching job. You turn that off. You have to dissolve the relationship and the tie between your present you and your pending you. You have to dissolve that, right? So, because the more let's say he posted a picture of him and his wife at, a teacher's meetup or something like that because they had a nice dinner. He has just reinforced what people already label him as, which is a math teacher. So I said, first of all, you got to go radio silent on that. Like, no, right? You can't do that.
So, for example, no more Insta photos around anything mathy.
Nothing. Nope. Yep. Absolutely. And then, secondly, I told him, I want you to round up some content that you find very, very valuable online about fitness. You don't even have to create it. You're busy. You're teaching math. You got a busy life. So go find a blog post from P90X or one of these other workout programs that you follow. take some pictures of the transformation that you achieved working out here. And I gave him a plan. I said, Monday, I want on Facebook, let's just say, for example, on Facebook on Monday, I want you to share one post from an article on fitness that you found very helpful. And then on Tuesday, I want you to post a quote on fitness that you found very helpful. And then on Wednesday, I want you to find another article and post that on your Facebook page. And on Thursday, I want you to find another fitness quote. Just go on brainyquotes.com or something like that. Find a quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger or Jack LaLanne and post that on Thursday. And then on Friday, just post a picture of you and your family, right? And then that's it. And I told him, if you do this, if you follow this to the T, within 90 days, people will start to think of you as a fitness guy. And you know what's funny, Alexander? I gave him this advice. He followed it. Within 3 weeks, I forgot that he was a math teacher, and I'm the one who gave him that advice. Because that's branding. It's branding. That's branding. That was him taking the fire brand, taking that iron, and just right onto his own hide, if you will, figuratively, and saying, I'm a fitness guy. And that's what branding is. And so, whether you're looking to advance it, like whatever that is, right? Like when I was in the corporate world and I got into the C-suite, I was like, I'm going to carry myself. I'm going to dress as if I already have the position. I'm going to act as if I already have the position. I'm going to display the leadership qualities that somebody in that position would have. And even if I don't get recognized by my own company, right? And I believe that there's something bigger at work here, right? Some people would call it God. Some people call it the universe. Some people call it energy, whatever that is. But I believed that if I were to assume that role in my heart of hearts and act like it and carry myself a certain way, then the right opportunities would come to find me. Because I do believe that the market always self-corrects. It has a way of weeding out the people that don't really, really do the work. So if you do it this way, there's just assume the role that you want and realize that if you have the discipline to focus on the pending you, the person that you want to become, you'll start to follow. Everything will start to fall into place.
So ever since that podcast post, I have been trying to take that on. So I'll put my hand up and say, I know you're love Insta and you're really good at it. I'm terrible at it. You look at photos I've cut off my own head before. But LinkedIn is what I'm really good at. So I've been trying to transition and take this approach on my own. So I've got very intentional posts about certain days a week. We've got this podcast. Another day is the Thursday Thoughts about board stuff. Another episode, a day of the week is going to be about a board that I am on or people I'm talking to just try and work on that persona. And I love the way that you've gone through yours very intentionally. So you've got certain ones about you speaking in spaces versus good thoughts. And I think we can all look at that and realize you are very much yourself and it comes through there, but you've also done it in a way that's good for your brand. And I think that's what you're sharing with all of us as we think about how to think ahead to, this is the type of board I would like to be on. How do I project that image so someone would look at that and say, I see how they fit in.
Yeah, absolutely. And those two channels are very different, right? LinkedIn and Instagram are very, very different channels. And what I mean by that is, if you use LinkedIn at all, I don't use it too much. But if you use LinkedIn at all, if I click on your profile on LinkedIn, it's actually very difficult for me to see what you posted in the past. Mm-hmm. It's not like Facebook where there's a feed that saves and I can scroll through and kind of get an idea of your history. So LinkedIn to me is actually a very transient platform. It's almost like Twitter in that regard. So if I were to double down on LinkedIn, the one thing that I would do a lot of is write a lot of articles and post it there. Because if I go to LinkedIn and click on, if someone clicks on my profile right now on LinkedIn, they're not necessarily going to see all the posts that I wrote before, right? All the updates, all the quotes, because it's a very transient platform. It's not wired that way. It's not geared up the way that Facebook is. But they will see that I've written a bunch of articles, and that stays there right on my profile. And so people might be able, if I have a good headline or pull the people in, they might be able to go scroll right down there and sift through a few articles that I wrote. Now with Instagram, people, it does curate the content. It sits there. So if people click on my profile on Instagram, with just a few swipes of the thumb, they can look through months of my own photos, and they're all there. So I treat them very, very differently. I treat LinkedIn very different from Instagram, very different from Facebook, very different from Twitter, because of the way that people use them. So, Facebook, I mean, when's the last time any of us wrote an article for Facebook using the Facebook Notes feature, right? I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Because that's just not how people use Facebook, but it is how they use LinkedIn. And so, if I were going into that strategy, I might do a little bit more in terms of like writing articles once you kind of have the time to do that. And what I did in the past was I just took some of the best articles that I wrote on my blog and copied and pasted them and put them into the LinkedIn Pulse section, which is their basically blog section. And, I generated content that way. So that's how I did it. But all in all, you want to make sure that what you're sharing and what you're presenting really line up with those things. And when people are publishing content, I teach often that folks consume content for one of three reasons. It's for education, for inspiration, or for entertainment. And in the LinkedIn space, I would probably say it's for education and inspiration, very little entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
On Instagram, it's probably backwards. It's probably mostly inspiration, then entertainment, then third is education. That's just the way people use that platform. And so I followed suit, and that's how I kind of create, like you said, like how are you yourself but still representing the brand?
Mm-hmm.
I think about if I'm going to post something on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, which one of these three lanes would this post fall under? And if it doesn't, then there's no point in posting it. Like if I'm going to take a picture of my food, which, I like taking pictures of my food, but then I thought about this, Alexander. I was like, when was the last time my life got I got educated, inspired, or entertained by someone's picture of their food? None. So I stopped posting pictures of my food, right? I stopped doing that. Now, if I post a picture of food, it's usually me doing something stupid with my food, like, chewing the bone of, a steak or something like that.
I remember
like
when you posted that on Instagram,
right? Yeah. And that's funny, right? So that's entertaining. So that falls under that category. But if I just took a picture of my steak and look how good this is, like, it's not any of those three things. So that's why that's how I filter through my decisions on making content.
But I think this is a great way of understanding that all of these platforms people are on and knowing where your target audience is. For example, LinkedIn is most likely where everyone who's in the corporate board space is, and they might also have some of the other social profiles. But it's funny how you talk about, I know you're not a LinkedIn guy, you don't do a lot there, but you have been very clear on your LinkedIn profile. So you've got that sort of John Nemo style. I remember he was on your show, number 132,
yep,
where you've walked it through in a very clear way. Someone can read that and quickly understand the value add and why you do what you do and those references. So you haven't ignored that channel. It's just not where you spend the most of your time. You've done it in the right way, which I think is so applicable for all of us. Can you break that down a little bit for us from LinkedIn, how you recommend using that? Because at the end of the day, that's where most probably corporate board people are focused.
Yeah, so LinkedIn, if you go on my profile, my LinkedIn is Mike Kim TV, and you can feel free to connect with me there. I get a lot of connections on LinkedIn, and I don't really know what to do with them because I don't use the platform that often, and I focus on the channels that I have the most fun with, and where I feel like people have had the longest standing relationship with me. The reason I don't use LinkedIn is because I never really used it, right? So when I got started in social media, Facebook was obviously the biggest thing that I used, mm-hmm. and then Twitter was very popular at the time. And then Instagram came along, and I just thought it was a lot more fun. So I started using that. But with LinkedIn, my friend John Nemo has a lot of trainings on LinkedIn. They're very, very good. And he was like, hey, you should at least, if you're not going to pay attention too much to this platform and being active on there, at least build it out so you don't embarrass yourself. And I liked that, I liked that, and because it is important to some people. And some people who do subscribe to my, blog or my podcast, they do find me, on LinkedIn, and they ask to connect with me there. And that's fine. And so what I do on LinkedIn is I just make sure that my headline is something that actually encapsulates the problem that I solve. So it will be something along the lines of helping thought leaders market and monetize their message through product launches and sales copy, right? Instead of saying President Mike Kim Enterprises Consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want, because that doesn't add value to anybody. It doesn't actually, it's not beneficial to answering the question of, Mike, what do you do, right? And so with LinkedIn, I kind of took this analogy where, like, if someone's trying to knock on your door, right, and like they're driving by they're trying to find your house for the first time. This is so appropriate because this weekend, I'm going up to New Hampshire to see my friends who were originally, we were friends in New Jersey. I've never been to their house. They moved to New Hampshire about a year ago. So we're all going to hang out there. And, if I'm driving around there and I'm trying to knock on their door, right, to get into the house, their lights are off. Mm-hmm. The shades are down. The path is full of shrubs, right, in the front lawn. There's no welcome mat. And, I knock on the door and there's no answer. Like, I'm going to feel like I'm in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of people's LinkedIn profiles look like. They look like an abandoned house because it has been. Now, at least mine doesn't look like an abandoned house. I might not be as active day to day on LinkedIn, but my profile does not look like it's an abandoned house. The lights are on, right? There are current pictures. I recently updated my headshot, right? Mm-hmm. The shades are open. You can get a glimpse into my work life. You can see my resume. You can see the projects that I've done. It invites people to, instead of shrubs in the path, they can click on an article and they can read it and they can get to know me a little bit better, right? And there are all these referrals there and everything like that. So that's just the way that I approached it. One of the things that I really liked that John did was to just do here's what I do, here's who I do it for, here's who I've worked with. Some people don't like that approach. I liked it because it was just quick and to the point, The thing is, like, most people can't write. They're not well versed in writing like these really compelling stories, right? And for the people on LinkedIn, they're just kind of touch and go. They process through information very quickly. So that's why I did it that way.
Well, after I saw yours and started going through some of John's stuff, I did it the same way as well because it's so easy to digest it. I think it's sort of fun as well. But I think what you're sort of walking us through here is how social media should be considered a tool. Because if you're looking to move from, say, being in the C-suite to being on a corporate board role, which is a big change, and being paid to do that means you have to have a certain skill set and a position of authority, social media is a tool that you can use. And you talk about that on so many of your shows. I know, for example, I think it was 157, how to use social media to reinvent yourself, which is sort of what we've been talking about, because you're moving people forward. And people are on different platforms for different reasons. What are your thoughts for someone who is beginning this and going, okay, I want to prepare to doing this? Do I have to spend all of this time and do all of them at once? Do I start in a certain place and build forward? What do you recommend for people?
Mm-hmm. This is going to sound almost like a trivial answer, but I really believe this. Do what's fun. And the reason I say that, Alexander, is because, like, when there's no joy behind it, it's going to be a chore. And that's the last thing any of us need, right? We're all busy people. A lot of your listeners, all of you tuning in, you're very busy, successful at what you do. The last thing you need is another chore. And so here's the advice that I give to people. If you're going to go into social media and you're going to use it to build relationships, right? You're basically marketing yourself. You're marketing what you know. If you're moving into a board role, right, it's going to be because of what you know and because of your reputation, your brand, right? And so I always say this. Marketing isn't about closing a sale. It's about opening a relationship. And if you are an expert in any kind of field, you're paid for what you think. You're paid to use your brain. You're paid for your thoughts, and you never share your thoughts, you have no marketing. Right? I can't read your mind. The last time I checked, people can't read your mind. They don't know what you know. And so actually the muscle that you have to develop right now is not how do I get really great at LinkedIn? How do I get really great at Instagram? How do I really get great at all these social media? That's not actually the muscle that I'm asking you to work out. The muscle I'm trying to get people to work out is the muscle of taking what you know and sharing it in a way that makes it easy for people to understand. Most people can't do that. And I don't talk about this often, but I'm glad we're talking about it here, because the key to my success hasn't been because I had a great targeted Instagram strategy or social media or a podcast. It's because on my podcast, I teach better than most people. I make it easy for people to remember. I mean, you cited like 2 or 3 podcast episodes already on the, and I didn't know you were going to do that.
But they all stick out of my brain because you do make it easy. You're also very good at like quick turns of phrases, which are memorable.
Exactly. So that's the muscle that I had to exercise all these years. I thought to myself, what do I remember from people teaching me things? What do I remember from, sermons that I heard when I was a kid growing up in church? What do I remember from the lectures in college that I went to? What do I remember from grad school? And they're all short, simple, memorable, right? I use alliteration sometimes. I tell a lot of stories because people will remember that. So I'm just a better teacher. And that's actually the muscle that I worked out a lot, right? The fact that I can just off the top of my head just kind of give you an analogy of driving up to my friend's house in New Hampshire, right? It's because I've used that analogy before. Understanding the different types of content, educate, inspire, entertain. That's a muscle that I developed because I was able to, just distilling all my thoughts into those 3 things was a muscle that I developed, right? And so what I would say here right now, this is a journey. What you're trying to do, if you're going to use social media this way, is to transition from an expert to a teacher. And not everybody can do that. And what is required is communication. It is writing. It is understanding how people digest information. It's understanding that you probably in your life have not sat through an 18-minute video on LinkedIn. So why would you expect anyone else to? Right? Let's get real about this. This is not how people consume this content. Right? It was so funny. Just a short time ago, I had a coaching call for a side business I have with a friend of mine, and we teach people how to raise money, right? Fundraisers. And one of the gals on the call asked, "Is it okay to use social media to fundraise?" And so I just took a poll and I said, "Okay, all right. How many of you have ever seen someone else ask for money on Facebook or on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and given them money?" No hands went up. These are fundraisers. No hands went up. I said, "How many of you have ever seen someone ask for money on social media and got annoyed?" Literally, 80% of the people raised their hand. And I said, "You hypocrites." And I was joking with them, but it was so true. I'm like, have we lost our ability for common sense here? You guys hate it when other people do it, but you think other people will love it because you're what, a special snowflake?
Right.
Right? And so I tell them, if it worked for other people, 90% of what other people have done that worked is going to work for you. The extra 10% is what is unique about you, and that's going to be the differentiator. So, Alexander, you could have a profile that reads like mine, the way that John taught us, and I could have one. And if it worked for John, it can work for you, it can work for me, right? But the difference, what sets us apart is that extra 10%, which is who you are versus who I am, which is who your colleagues are and where you live versus who my colleagues are and where I live. And that's what most folks don't understand. They think that everything has to be original, everything has to be different. Oh, Mike, that worked for the math teacher who became a fitness instructor, but you don't understand my world. And that's when I say, oh, I'm sorry, special snowflake. What makes you so different? These are channels that, people use every day by the billions, right? And there's certain rules and algorithms and all these things, approaches that apply. What sets you apart is that extra 10%, right? And that's what you focus on making different, not the other 90% that always works. And that's how I would phrase that. Yeah.
And so, Mike, I think what you've done is broken down all of your methodologies and your frameworks. We've just scratched the surface today, but I've always gotten so much of your podcast because it is teachable and it is memorable, which is very useful. So we will clearly be sharing some of those links to the episodes with people. But I know you've got a project coming up later this year where you're bringing a lot of these best thoughts together. You got a book coming out, right? Can you sort of tease that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So, I'm going to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that. I'm writing a book right now. We got the publisher and the book deal already, but I've got to actually do the work, right? And I'm just taking everything, or as much as I've learned on personal branding. My podcast is called Brand You, and that was taken from a phrase coined by Tom Peters years and years ago, before the whole internet marketing age. And I just love the phrase. I think it really resonated with me, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. So I'm going to share a lot of the stuff from my podcast, from coaching people through the years, from working with top business thought leaders like John Maxwell, Donald Miller, Suzanne Evans, Catalyst Leadership. All these folks have hired me over the last couple of years, and the things that I share on the podcast and that I will share in the book are the same methodologies and strategies that I've used with them. It's because these things work, right? Because it's the 90% that just works. The 10% that's different is what who that person is and what their demeanor and their personality and their personal story is. So I'm aiming to get this book out by the holidays, end of the year, December this year. Be working on that. And somewhere along the way, I will be opening up a membership site called the Brand You Collective for a lot of folks, for the folks who want to build personal brands. And what I mean by that, people who are thought leaders, speakers, coaches, consultants, and authors who are struggling not with their craft, but with marketing themselves as a business. I like to say business is nothing more than solving a problem for a profit. And if I can help you market your services to solve a certain problem, then I'd love to work with you, and that's what we do. So. Thank you for just allowing me to share some of that.
Yeah, and
we're really excited about it.
I should probably give the disclaimer that I'm not an affiliate, but I am a member of your collective group, and I've signed up, and I get so much out of your trainings and your podcast. And, we're not the only people who use it. You helped Donald Miller write the Story Brand Framework books.
Absolutely. So, I've just had a great experience. Like, I've just been privileged to work with some great people, and now in turn take all those things that I've used in the past. And gotten results for people with, and just teach them, because I really do I believe in this strongly. I believe in empowering people to live the life that they want and to do the work that they actually love and believe in. And if you want to earn a living, if you want to make an impact, you want to grow your influence by sharing what you already know, then I want to help.
And I think the reality is you've got so much knowledge to give, Mike. There's a reason that your Brand You podcast is the #1 rated in iTunes for the personal branding topic. And I love that you sort of shared all that with our audience today. And for anyone looking to move into the corporate role, to get to be a paid board director, the personal brand is essential. And we just sort of scratched the surface today. So we'll link to your podcast where I get so much value out of it every week. And I appreciate you coming to our audience today and giving us more insights and ideas about how all of us can be more boardroom bound. So thank you for joining us.
It was a pleasure to be with you guys. I look forward to continuing the conversation. If you find me on LinkedIn or Instagram or on my podcast, I will respond. Just let me know you heard our interview here today. And now we're all friends because we met on Alexander's podcast. We have great taste. We have something in common, which is Boardroom Bound podcast. So, now we're friends. So thank you for your time, all of you today. It's a privilege.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I loved chatting with Mike Kim. This is someone that I have learned so much from over the last year or two, and I know that all of us can be learning from as well, because each of us has to work on our personal brand. We have got to position ourselves as people of authority if we want to be on a paid board role. And Mike gives us very actionable strategies about how, for example, on social media, which all of us are using, at the very least LinkedIn, probably Insta or Twitter or Facebook, you can use those channels to advance yourself, and in a way that's just so logical and easy. And he talked about doing it in a fun way as well, which I think is important because then it's not a chore. Now remember to head over to podcast.gordon.edu where you can get links to all of today's resources, and there were a lot. The Boardroom Bound team and I are proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content like today that we're working hard to bring you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more strategies and stories from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.